Generally, what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit briefly about about pre-camp, a little bit about your role, kind of like name, rank, and serial number, so to speak.
What I did, yeah.
Right. What you did, and then we'll go into a little bit about what you might have known before about what you were going to do, a little bit about how old you were, things like that, some basic information.
Okay.
You can tell me. You were from what town?
I was from Briceville, Briceville, Tennessee, TN.
Is that west, east Tennessee?
That's near Oak Ridge.
Oh, okay. So you're not far from home now.
About 9 miles, about 15 miles.
Okay. You joined the military, or you were drafted?
Joined in March the 9th, 1943.
Okay.
And was sent to Fort Sill, Oklahoma as a trainee to learn basic training. And the basic training was on telephone systems, switchboards, combat, all that stuff. Because I was going to be in the field artillery. And that lasted 13 weeks. After that, I went to, was sent back to another place, which was Camp Pickett, Virginia. And I was there 6 months. And then from Camp Pickett, Virginia, I went to overseas. And that was, I can give you dates. I've got dates hid down here and stuff. I can give you dates. Anyway, we had all kinds of different training. We had amphibious training. We had mountain climbing, and went to West Virginia for mountain climbing. And we had, after that, we went to Boston, and we were shipped overseas, and we were on a ship, and of course they were having a storm in the Atlantic, and they were having us get out on deck and take exercise. And of course, when you the boat was a large ship, but it was pitching like 50 feet up, 50 feet down, stuff like that, because the waves were so high. And at that time, they said, you got to do this. So we were out there, and we were going like this, back. And they said, well, we've got good news and we got bad news. The good news is that this storm is going to be over. The bad news is it's not going to be over until we get to where our destination. And
at the time, what did you know your destination to be?
We didn't know. We knew it was somewhere in Europe, but we didn't know where.
Did you know what you were headed to do?
We knew we were going to be in the war whenever they decided. Is that what you mean?
Did you know that you were actually going to liberate anybody?
Well, we didn't know what we were going to do. We were going to try. Let's put it that way.
What did you know at the time about the plight of the Jewish people? And
well, we had read quite a bit about them, about how they were slaughtering them, how they were killing them, and using all these different forms to kill them with. And,
did you believe that?
Oh yeah, I believe anything that they say.
We had some accounts that people felt that was absolutely impossible, that they thought that it was completely absurd.
No.
But you believed it. You knew
that
was something.
I knew they were. I knew they.
You were how old at the time?
I think I was 19 when I went in. 20 when I was in combat, I guess. And in the prison camp, I was 20 years old.
So you're on the Atlantic.
Yeah, we were on the Atlantic. Then we were on it 7 days, and it was up and down. Everybody was seasick just about, and the mess hall got real muddy. I mean, not muddy, coffee everywhere, all over the place. Slide, slip, and people could hardly stand up. And I think I ate about 2 apples the whole 7 days. Most everybody was sick, you know what I mean, real
Sure.
sick. Yeah. So when we got over there, we landed at Portsmouth, England, and then we were put on a train and we went to a small town in Wales called Velindre, Velindre. And this town, we were in barracks, and we had another 6 months training there. And we went on mountain climbing and all kinds of stuff. And every time it rained, of course, we went on about a 9-mile hike, you know, so we can fill our raincoat pockets full of water and things like that. It really did. And after that, we went to England, and there was a town called Cheltenham, and we were there about 3 months, and we did some maneuvers and all that kind of stuff, and mock combat against other divisions and things like that. And then we went over to France. In France, that was, we went over there in July. And we didn't go on D-Day, but we were supposed to be reserved. So they were at St. Lo, approximately at St. Lo, when we got over there July 27th. That's when we got to France. And we landed on the Omaha beach, where most of our soldiers had landed before on D-Day. Then our first combat was just outside of St. Lo, and it was they had one thing happening there. They said that our planes were coming over, and they were bombing, and they were told to bomb the smoke. So the smoke was supposed to have been going west. Instead, it started going east. So they started bombing east, and they tore up about one division, bombing them. Anyway, that was one of the things they lost. We were, what I did in combat, I guess you want to know that, is I laid wire for telephones, and I operated switchboards, and sometimes 3 or 4 miles of wire. And then if we couldn't catch up with the enemy, then we would have to stop and go as far as we could, and then start laying wire again until we could catch up with them. It was fairly fast going through France. Our division was one that liberated quite a few towns. To make
I'm sorry, 1 second. I'm trying to figure out what that is. It sounds like it's in a glove.
coffee pot.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
It's probably a
Let's cut it down. Okay. Thought if I can hear it, you can hear it.
yeah.
Let's see now. Oh yeah, they said it was crumbling and all this kind of stuff. And, we liberated Paris, and they had this big parade. I had some pictures, you know, that shows the parade, and it shows one vehicle just behind us. They had pictures made of it, but they missed ours. Anyway, I've got that at home in case you're interested in it. But I don't think I brought it with me.
Had you talked to any civilians at this time about what was going on?
Yeah, we talked to quite a few civilians, and there was one civilian, you know, he said that the Germans were out in a certain place, and then we would send somebody out there to get them. And they had mined a lot of areas, and as they had mined these areas, the people would get out there and maybe they'd step on one of them themselves. And there was one Catholic priest that was said he was going to show them where the mines were. So he walked out probably, I'd say, 200 yards, and bang, he was gone. He stepped on one. He didn't know that one was there.
You were there for that?
Yeah, we were there. And later on, we were going so fast that we couldn't lay wire fast enough. We'd do 5-6 miles, and then all of a sudden they'd say stop, we were going to move on. And we got to Paris, and of course we liberated Paris, 28th Infantry Division did. And if you've seen any of those pictures of the liberation of Paris, well, it is mostly the 28th Infantry Division. And they said they had the Free French Army. The Free French, they gave them 2 weeks off to stay in Paris. And they told us that now you guys got to go on. You're in combat. You got to go on. You can't stop. So we were, my friend and I, Pete Finley from Philadelphia, were laying wire on the outside outskirts, going toward another town. And several French people, girls and boys, came down there singing the German national anthem. And I told him, I was up on a pole, and I said, you better get your carbine out, we might need it.
So I suppose, how are you feeling at this point?
Well, I was feeling pretty good, you know. We were doing okay. And, so we liberated a lot more towns. We liberated the capital of Luxembourg. We liberated Brussels, Belgium, and there was a big list of places we got. I was going to bring a book, but I forgot to bring it.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah, anyway. Whenever we left Paris, we liberated all these others. Eventually, we got up to what they call the Hurtgen Forest.
Say that again?
Hurtgen, Hurtgen.
Hurtgen Forest?
Hurtgen
Okay.
Forest. And there, they were just feeding one division in, and they were getting shot up, and they'd feed another division in, and they'd get shot up. And so they sent us up there, and I was operating the switchboard, and one of the forward observers, who is a lieutenant, he was wanting to, he said the Germans were coming in a forest over there on the other side, and he wanted to fire the entire corps of artillery on this group. He said there's probably 3,000 to 4,000 of them. And so when he said when he was ready, you know, he would tell them. He said they're coming in with flashlights here in the nighttime. They don't need flashlights, you know. It was Germans aren't supposed to be able to, they're supposed to see in the dark. And anyway, they had flashlights. So we let, he called and said, okay, let them go ahead, you know, with the firing corps. So they did. It lasted about 20-30 minutes. He said, I think we got most of them. And that was the end of that. But then they started dropping mortars in on my area right there where I was sitting. I was in a hole operating the switchboard, you know, and there was about 5 guys standing outside in front of me. talking. And so on one of those shells landed and wounded 5 or 6 of them. And I got a little dirt in my face, but that was all. And so I called up the captain, and I told him what was going on. I said, we have 6 wounded up here. What should we do about it? He said, well, bring them all out, you know. So we brought them all out, and we left and went somewhere else, back to the base, you know, where we were. After that, they took our division out, supposedly, and put another division in. They cut them all in pieces, too. They lost about half the division. And while they were doing that, then they said, we're putting you guys on a rest area. And the rest area happened to be 25 miles long on the Belgian and the German border and Luxembourg border and all that. Well, that was fine for a while. And along about in December, we started seeing all these Germans, you know, over there. And they said, oh, that's okay, you know, don't worry about it. And at this time, I was up in what we call the pillbox, where it's a large concrete enforced, where you keep your, if you have switchboards or whatever.
Tell me, what town are you in right now?
We were in the town of, at that particular time, let's see, we were in a town near, called Auren, O-U-R-E-N. It's the nearest town. It was a very small town.
And what, in Germany?
It was in Luxembourg.
Luxembourg.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Then we were in that town, and we went up on the hill, you know, near the top, where they had this fortress, or this pillbox had been captured, and we were going to stay there. So there's 6 of us in that. We were supposed to keep communications in the lines and stuff back and forth, and we were doing that. And then they came up and they said, "Okay, I'm taking 3 of you guys out, and leave you 3 up here." So they left me up there with the other 2, and so December the 16th, which was about 6 o'clock in the morning, they were coming along. Germans started going down our road right beside where we were. So we called the lieutenant and I asked him where the captain was. The captain always told me what to do, you know. And the lieutenant always said, "Well, you'll be all right, just stay where you are." And at this time he said, I told him, I said, "We're being invaded up here," and he said, "Well, it's okay, don't worry about it," says nothing happened. And I said, "What do you mean nothing happened?" I said, he said, "Well, there's nothing back here, you stay up there where you are." And I said, "Well, tell you what, one thing you're going to know about it in about 30 minutes, because what's up there?" And I said, "Well, there's the Tiger tanks, there's Panther tanks, and there's infantry, and there's probably just still coming in streams." And, well, okay, you just stay up there.
Not worried about it.
I'm not worried about it. I said,
Let me interrupt you really quick. At this time, you're with how many soldiers?
there was only 2 more of us, 3 of us.
There was a total of 3 of you
Yeah.
in this area.
They took the others out and left us up there for communications.
You were being surrounded by,
Well, they were going down the road beside us. We were in the pillbox here, we'll say, and the road went down this way, and they were like 100 yards away going down the road. So we didn't know when that they'd come over and blow up the pillbox. I mean, that's normally what you do, but they weren't meeting any resistance, so they weren't worrying about our pillbox. what they were going to do is go down until they met some resistance, and then they would take care of that. But the lieutenant wasn't interested, so we stayed up there till the night of the 17th.
In the pillbox.
In the pillbox, yeah. And they were still coming back. Really.
Had they not seen you?
No, we were in the pillbox, and we didn't know when they were going to blow it up or anything like that.
You were surprised by now that they hadn't already.
Yeah. Anyway, we decided then, my friend and I, about us three, we decided we'd have to go somewhere. No matter where it was, we'd have to get out of that place.
Right.
Because we wouldn't get. Okay, we started out, and we met a colonel up there, and he said, well, I'm the only one here, and we said, what should we do? He said, I'm not in charge. Says, what I say to do is every man for himself. Take care of yourself. So we went on back down that way toward the town. And when we got down there, we had a Jeep, and the guy was going to get something to take somewhere else. Well, when he did, there was 3 Germans stepped out with guns. They had a machine gun and rifles, and they told us to halt, that kind of stuff. So we knew we'd already messed up. We got in the wrong place. So they put us in the house and kept us till 9 o'clock that morning. I mean, not morning, night, at night.
And this is in what month? Are we December?
Okay, we're December 17 right now.
Okay. 1944.
1944. And so they said, when we stayed there to about 9 o'clock, and they said that they were supposed to bomb that place at 9 o'clock. Well, they decided they'd move us out. And then we moved back over the hill, the same where we came from, past the pillbox, all that kind of stuff. And we got down to the next town, I guess it was. Of course, there was Germans coming over, tanks and everything. They were trying to run over us with a tank, and we'd run up a bank or something like that to get away from them. And so when we got down there, about 2 o'clock in the morning, they found a lime pit where it's lime. And they said, you guys are going to sleep here. They made us sleep in the lime pit. And we slept about 2 hours, I guess. And of course, we had lime all over us then. And,
lime?
Lime.
And you slept in that?
Yeah, well, that they made us. And there was no other choice.
Sure.
We had one other choice.
Right.
So, anyway,
Did you have any idea what was happening at the time? I mean, you were aware you were in POW, but...
Yeah, we knew that we didn't have much of a chance, that kind of stuff. So we went on down to a railroad station. So, make a long story short, they put us in one of these cattle cars, what we call 40 and 8s. There were 40 men or 8 horses, is what the French called them. And they put us on a train. And then we were on this train several days, but we weren't going anywhere hardly. We were just kind of going a little bit at a time. Americans would come over and bomb us, or French or something. Not French, but British. And they thought it, was legal because it was behind the lines. It is legal. It's behind the lines and all that kind of stuff.
Did you know what was happening right now?
We knew what was happening because they bombed their car right up above us, and I think they said later that they killed 8 and wounded 43 in that car. And the German guards out there got mad, and they came down through there, and they were shooting their rifles into the cars. And as they hit one fella in the neck somewhere here, and he died. He was standing up. He died about 15 minutes later, I guess.
That was in the car you were in?
The car I was in. Of course, he stayed in there nearly a week because, like I said, we got on that train about December 18th, and we didn't get 35, 40 miles to on account of bombings and different things like that.
What about food and water?
We didn't get any food and water. Some people said they did, but they didn't give any in our car. And no bathrooms or anything for that matter. Of course, there's not much left after a few days. And so actually,
What was going through your mind now? You're obviously suffering from fatigue, cold,
yeah. Well,
dehydration, and
figure
hunger.
that there's not much of a way you can get out of it right now, but you may be able to get out of it later.
Is that how was your mental state of survival at the time?
Well, I've always figured I was going to survive unless somebody killed me.
So there wasn't a point where you said, "This is it. I'm checking out."
No, no. A lot of people did check out, but not me.
What do you attribute that to, though? 7 days without food and water in those conditions. How do you attribute your sense of survival?
Well, you figure you'll get to eat sometime if you live long enough. And anyway, we'll go on with the rest of the story or a little bit more. After we got to this station, we were sent to Bad Orb. That was a prison camp. We were put in that Bad Orb prison camp then. Okay, we were put in the barracks, and we didn't get much to eat there either. I mean, it was supposedly we got soup in a helmet because they had taken everything practically we could. They left their helmets, but they took our mess kits. They took everything that we had, so you had to eat out of your helmet. And if you had a little book or something, otherwise you might be able to keep it. But they took all the money and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, we stayed there for a while.
You were issued one meal a day?
We got for so-called breakfast was some stuff that they called it's like coffee, but it was ersatz, and it was kind of weak, and you got a little bit of that, about 6 months, and that was your breakfast. In your lunch, you normally didn't get anything, and for what they call, we'd call supper or the evening meal, we got 6 men on a loaf of bread. The bread was about this long, so something like that. About six men. Well, since our knives had been taken away, I think one or two might have borrowed one from somebody else that wasn't in the same group we were, and they cut the bread. And of course, the one that cut the bread got the last choice, and that's the way it operated. Well, we stayed there about several months.
Living on one piece of bread and half a cup of coffee a day.
Yeah, and there was some so-called soup that they gave us at lunchtime, but it was a little bit of soup, and it was mostly water and a few cabbage and turnips and stuff like that, and that was about all that was in that. And one day, they would send us out sometimes in the snow and all, it's real cold, to go out and pick up wood in the forest, and we'd bring that back for the Germans themselves. And we got to have a little fire in a little tiny stove about 1 hour a day in the afternoon for a month or so, and that's about it. The next, excuse me, the next area before we left there, there's 3 different things happened. One was that you looked outside and there was about 27 deer. 27 deer that we saw, and they were going along, and they were, hopping along real fast. And we said, that's what freedom is.
Take your time.
After that, excuse me.
Some water.
After that, another day, the Germans, on Sunday morning, the kitchen didn't have a fire in it. So they made all of us get out, stand in the snow for something like 3 hours. And they said that some person who had been working with them, who had been on what we call kitchen police or KP, had killed or tried to kill one of them, and he was cut on the arm, and he supposedly bleeding. So what they would do, they were going to make us pull up our sleeves up to right about here. We stood there while they inspected everybody in the camp, which was about 2 or 3 hours. And then they went all through all the barracks, and they finally located the guy who had, a cut arm. So they took him out. He never did come back. I suppose they took him out and shot him somewhere. He never did come back, but that was the thing there. So then, shortly after that, they said that they were going to take a bunch of people and send them to another camp. And this is where that we were supposed to go to Bergen. But we didn't know where it was or anything. They didn't tell you anything. So what we did, they lined up everybody that they thought, they said that they thought if they were Jewish, they had told them not to tell them that they were Jewish. The Americans said, don't tell them. Said we will stand behind you. And of course they couldn't, Anyway, they looked at the dog tags and stuff like that. The dog tags, if you had an H on it, it's Hebrew. If you had a P on it, it's Protestant. Of course, I was a Protestant, so I had a P on mine. And but he was sending them, this way and this way. And so when they got to me, he looked at my dog tags and saw what it was, and he put my name down. He asked me, if I was in the infantry, and I said yes, and that was all it was said. And so he didn't like what I said for some reason or other, so he screwed up my name. I think I showed you my name there where he screwed it up, so I would not be identified. Anyway, his name was Lieutenant Hack, H-A-C-K, and eventually then they set me up to get on the train again. Of course, we were going on another train, and there was the number of 350, 51 or something like that was how many people were in these 48 cars. We had about 60 in each car, something like 5 or 6 cars. And of course we were locked in, of course, and we stayed in there another 5 or 6 days until we got to the next camp, and that was the Bergen. And Bergen had a camp there where they killed a lot of people, a lot of Jewish people. They were, we would see when we passed there, some of them were hanging, they'd leave them hanging maybe 4 or 5 days or whatever. And when we got there, they decided some of us would go to work in the tunnels. There were 17 tunnels they were digging. And these tunnels were supposedly what we have been told would be to put missiles in that they were going to fire at Belgium. Of course, there were 17 of those tunnels. My friend and I, he was from Pittsburgh, and we were put in the first tunnel to begin with. And people started working, you know, and the guy, he started beating the devil out of everybody, kicking them, he was hitting them with shovels and all that kind of stuff. And I told my friend, I said, now, we've got to get out of here some way. You know, we just can't stay here. And he said, okay, so we go sneak out, you know, we go to number 2, and that same thing going on there, and 3 and 4, and we just kept going till we got to the last one, which is 17. And we said, well, we know where else we're supposed to go. We have to stay here. Whatever happens, happens. And he said, yeah, that's true. Anyway, these people, they were civilians, and they had been forced to work there too. And one of them was from Aachen, which was in Germany. And they asked me one day, said, have you ever been to Aachen? And I said, sure, I was up there in the battle. And she said to the other man, he said, he's the one who blew up your house. That guy said, well, war is war. And he knew somebody blew it up, but he didn't know who blew it up. Anyway, he told me, he said, now when this guy with a brown suit comes in here, don't you talk to me. I don't want to know your name. You don't want to know my name. Because this could be used against us. They could kill us right now, you know, with a pistol or whatever he decides to do. This the guy's the honcho here. And so he said, just remember, if they come in here, or he comes in here, I'll probably kick you, or I'll hit you with something, or throw a rock at you. But there was 3 guys working there. But anyway, he never had to do that because we didn't tell him her name, or he didn't tell us.
Now you're where now? In
I'm in Berga.
You're in Berga.
The tunnel.
In the tunnel.
Right.
17th tunnel.
Right. And we're digging the tunnel there for them to put some armament in, that they were like missiles that they were going to fire over Belgium.
And what month are we in?
We're in February right now.
So you've been in the camps now for 2 months. Approximately 2 months.
All the camps, yeah.
All the camps
or
combined.
The train.
Right.
Okay.
How's your health at this point?
Well, I was getting weak, but I was losing weight and all this kind of stuff. But we just had to do what we had to do.
This is 1945.
Right.
The Third Reich is completely crumbled.
Yeah. But that made these people madder.
The one, the experience that people feel around this time is that the only people that are really hanging on now, as far as to in allegiance to Hitler and into the Third Reich, would be the most fanatical and the most crazed Nazis of all.
You see, this was run by the Gestapo and the SS. The Schalby 5 is what it was.
Say that again?
Schalby 5
Schalby 5?
was the SS controlled.
Right.
And this was the concentration camp that we were in, Berga.
Right.
It belonged to that group.
So at this point you hadn't heard about Americans coming?
Well, we knew that Americans were coming because this one man, he listened to this radio at home. And he came and he'd tell us, you know, there's so-and-so and so-and-so. I mean, he was... we weren't supposed to say anything about this, you know, because he'd get killed himself if he'd give us any information. He was asking what we had to eat with, and we told him we didn't have anything because they had they had taken everything away. And he said, what do you have? We told him, you know, this stuff in the morning, and at lunchtime they sent us to work, and at night we got the sixth of a loaf of bread. And that was it. Okay, he said, well, do you have any spoons or knife to cut the bread? And we said, no, we don't ourselves, but somebody else has one and we borrow it and stuff like that. He said, well, what I'm going to do tomorrow, I'm going to bring a small knife, a very small knife. That's one we got there. And it's this one here, that one there. And he said, a spoon, I'll bring a spoon. So he did. And he said, what I want you to do is go out there and stand in the dark, and there's nobody there, and I'll come out, put this in your hand from behind, and then you can put it in your pocket.
Why do you suppose he was doing that?
Because this guy that was in charge would shot him if he knew he was talking to us, or...
No, I mean, why do you suppose he was talking to you? Why do you suppose he was helping?
Well, he felt sorry for people. He was in the war too, and he wasn't being paid much at all either. But he said that he didn't get much to eat himself, but he didn't bring us any food or anything, but he said he would bring us a spoon and a knife.
So at this point, how close are you to liberation?
Okay, that was in February, and we were liberated in April 23rd.
So you were in camps for 6 months by the time you were liberated?
Well, from December
5
until
months. April.
127 days.
127 days.
Yeah, that's about little over 3 months. See, we were captured the 17th of December, then January, February, March, and April 23rd. But one day, they had brought a bunch of people in, new people, and
New people being Americans? Or?
No, these were displaced persons and, okay. One of them talked to me when I brought my car out, you know, with those other guys. We brought this cart out and dumped it in the river. That's what you did with your rock, dumped it in the river. Okay, this fellow was sitting there. He was a displaced person, and he was looked real badly, you know. And he said to me, I talked to him. He said, "Well, I can speak 7 different languages."
It's okay.
And,
You want me to put this on the table
no,
for you?
it's okay. He said, I came from Warsaw. We walked all the way. So there was 2,000 of us, and there's only 200 now. They shot most of them. That's the last time I saw him. Okay, let's see. Next thing is what some of us did. If we find a hammer or something like that, we had to cross this part of this river, the bridge, and they dropped tools in there and stuff like that, and try to. But that made it, I guess it made it harder on us than it did them, probably. That kind of thing. Anyway, we worked in there for till February something. I've got the number, got the here, but right now I can't get them. I'd have to look for them. Anyway, we'll go on a little further. We'll say they decided then they were going to close the camp, and They were going to try to kill everybody. Everybody was going to be killed. And the ones that were unable to move, or to walk, they were going to kill them. And some of them they did put on a little old cart, and they dumped 8 or 10 people on top of each other on a cart. Well, they probably killed them by putting them on top of somebody else, that kind of stuff. Anyway, so we would walk maybe 15 miles a day, and you'd have to stop maybe every few minutes because most of the guards were real old. They were like 70 years old, and they couldn't walk very far either. And so they'd stop, and the political prisoners, they were shooting them alongside the road, and I would see a lot of them as they walked along. They would throw off this coat or jacket they had. If they had a mess kit or something, they'd throw it down, and they'd throw out everything they could to walk a little further. And after we've seen, I'd say at least 500 in just a little spot, where they shot them in the back of the head. And they told us they were going to do that to us as soon as we fell out. And so we said, we'll see. We would stop in a barn or somewhere like that. They'd let us stay in the barn or beside the road. And they would maybe give us a little bit of soup or something like that if there was a farmer there that was. One time near the end, we got to a potato farm, and they told us, now you got to go out here and help them pick these potatoes up, but if you eat one, we're going to shoot you. Well, you turned your back and said, and then you couldn't watch everybody at the same time. So we, picking them up, we ate a few of them along. And when we went through this town of Grice, G-R-E-I-Z, that's the first town we went through. What's that?
Cell phone. He'll get it.
He'll get it.
Yeah,
Want me to be quiet till he gets through. Yeah, we were walking. Okay. And we got there to the potato field, and we had some potatoes. And of course, then when we were in Grice, G-R-E-I-Z.
Is that G as in go or T as in Tom?
G
Okay.
as in go.
Okay.
R-E-I-S.
Okay. And
It's
this
a
is
town. And
a
anyway,
town?
Yeah. Anyway, this a girl was going to get a loaf of bread, and she's going to hand it to me. By the time this guy hit me in the back with a rifle butt, she ran back in the house crying. And he's cussing and going on, And so when we walked a little bit further, there was some older gentlemen and ladies sitting up on the 3rd floor balcony there. And they'd been watching all this parade, for days going down through there. And of course, they were sitting up there crying. Okay. We went on and on until we got to one place. This is going 15 miles a day or something like that. I've got a cough. Trying to clear my throat up.
It's okay. I'll get you a little more water. Sorry.
Okay. After that, we came to another farmer's house, And this farmer said to the sergeant who was in charge, said, I would like for you to take your people and go on. The war is over. I will feed these people barley. I have enough barley. And he said, no, I'm going to kill every one of them. And so he wouldn't let us stay there. But the man said he would take care of us. And he was a German. Okay, we went on, to the next place and stopped here, of course. Losing more people all the time.
You know where you're headed?
Headed east, south, northeast. We were down, Berger was down in the southeastern part, and we were headed like northeast going up.
Were the Nazis telling you anything?
No, they didn't know anything.
You were just walking.
Yeah, they knew that it was going to be over for them pretty soon, but we could hear firing, like cannons and things like that, artillery, and we knew it wouldn't be too many days. But,
How many of you left roughly around the same time?
how many were left?
How many were you when you first started the walk?
Oh, that was the entire camp.
The entire camp.
Yeah.
So would you be able to?
Well, we had 350 of Americans and soldiers, but several of them had already died, and they buried them in various places. But we probably had maybe 300 or so left, I guess.
How long had you been walking at this point? How many days would you say?
Well, right now I can't say. I've got it written down, but
Okay.
I can tell you later.
Sure.
Okay, it's
Sure.
okay. How many days? But when we almost got to where we ended up, we would stay in a barn. Okay, we stayed in a barn. This would be their last night, and we could hear the firing of cannon and machine guns and all this kind of stuff.
What did you think what that was?
Americans coming, and so we were in this barn, and the German sergeant said that he was going to do something to us. He's going to kill us if the Americans came. Anyway, he decided it might be better to save his own skin, so he sneaked out, he and all of his buddies. So we woke up in the morning, there was nobody there. In other words, no Germans. All of us were Americans. And so when I looked out, I saw a half-track coming down the road in tanks. So, excuse me. This is a little different from what they showed in that movie, supposedly. They said it was a green, grassy field and that kind of stuff. Well, the one I went through I was the first one out the door. And I went down through a plowed field, and I fell down about 3 times before I ever got to half-track. Got on the half-track, and they took me, gave me something to eat and took me along with them. And
These are the American soldiers?
yeah. And I'd left all the rest of them. I don't know what happened to them, Didn't see them anymore for ages. And so they said, they gave me a rifle and said, we're going to let you kill all these Germans now. And I said, we can't find them, they're gone. They said, oh, we'll find them. And anyway, they took me on almost to Czechoslovakia. It was about probably 30 miles or something. And after a while, the lieutenant caught up with him. And he said, looked at me and he said, what in the hell is that? And they said, oh, he's a GI. He said, he doesn't look like a GI. And they said, well, he is. He just got out of that camp, And he said, what are you going to do with him? And he said, well, we're going to take him out and let him shoot these Germans. And they said, no, you're not. He's got to go back to the hospital. He says, I'm taking him to the hospital. So he did. He took me back to the first aid station, you know. And the girl there that came in, she said, I got to take some blood, you know, and doing this. And she poked around there. I said, well, if I've got any, you know. She poked around. After a while, she ran out crying. Says, I can't get any blood. And so they sent another man in there, and he was, he did okay. I mean, he didn't get too scared or whatever. And I would probably weighed, they said I weighed less than 80 pounds. That's what they said there. I weighed less than 80, and I did weigh 195 when I got in combat. And so after that, while I was in there, in this little thing, first aid station, there was one sergeant over there that was in his bed, his bunk, and he had been given some poison whiskey by a German woman. And he was up on all fours hopping around in his bed. He'd hop this in, hop down, turn, and come back. He's around much pain, you know. And he finally died, of course, from that. And I asked him, I said, what happened to this fella? And he said, well, he drank the wrong whiskey. And so it killed him. And
What's going through your head now?
Well,
You've been rescued.
I'm just glad to be there and want to know what the next step was. So next time day or two, they put me on a plane. And,
Let me interrupt you briefly. Were you married at this time?
oh, no.
No,
I
okay,
was
so you weren't
20
married. You had your parents.
Right.
You were concerned about letting them know you were okay, I'm
Right.
sure.
Mhm.
Did they let you contact them from there?
No.
No.
No, not there. It's not like today, you know, when they say
Sure.
somebody calls home and all this kind
It's
of
on
stuff.
the news.
Oh,
Yeah.
Here I am.
Right.
Anyway.
How were the American soldiers treating you?
American soldiers? Well, they were treating me fine. I mean, they just more or less wasn't much they could do.
Did you feel taken care of and supported, or?
Oh yeah. I probably looked like John Walker Singh, you know, whenever
Sure. Sure.
That's why the lieutenant wondered who in the heck I was.
What that was,
Yeah.
right.
It,
So they sent you back to America, to the States?
no, they put me on a plane and they sent me to a hospital and they said.
Do you know what hospital? Were you in?
This one was like a first aid station. They
Like a
did.
MASH unit?
Like a MASH unit.
Right.
Okay, and they kept me there a few days, and then they said, okay, we're going to send you to Reims, France, to a hospital there.
Right.
I was the only one left. I mean, I don't know where everybody else was, but thought I was doing okay. And anyway, they sent me to this hospital in Reims, France, and it was a nice hospital. And there was a nurse in there from Memphis, Tennessee, and I was the only PW that was there. So she told me, said, now, what I want you to do is eat food and eat as much as you want, and you go down there 6 times a day to the mess hall and get you something to eat. So I'd go down there, and they got tired of it down there, you know, so they said, now, we're not going to give him any more food. He doesn't need it. And she said, yes, he does. He's going to get it. And so she said, you go over down there and get your food. And, anyway, they weighed me. I think first week I gained 13 pounds, second week 12 pounds, and third week 11 pounds. And I think I weighed, after several weeks, I weighed like 154. And the doctor said, I'm ready to send you home now, bud. He said, what do you mean send me home? I didn't look like this when I left home.
I got 40 more pounds to go.
Yeah. He said, okay, I'll let you stay a little longer anyway. I'll let you stay 2 more weeks and then you can go to Paris. That's just on the way home, you know, you have to get off in Paris and then you go on back home. So I was happy to be.
How long was your recovery time?
They kept me there 6 weeks.
So tell me, you're from Bryson,
Bryceville.
Bryceville, okay, and you came back to
B-R-I-C-E-V-I-L-L-E.
Tennessee
Yes,
from France.
from France.
From
Yeah.
recovery.
Came back
And
home.
you were here and you met Mrs. Carden when?
No, we've been known each other since the 7th grade.
Oh, you'd already known each other. You just weren't married yet.
Didn't even think of it.
So you were married how soon after you came home?
1947.
Right after you came home,
About
almost.
two years after I came home in September of 45. We were married in March of 1947. Then we had 2 children. Karen was first, and she was born in 1952. And Fred was second, and he was born in 1954.
Tell me something. The experience that you've gone through, I know you could speak about hate and racism. It's not necessarily your experience being not Jewish. Tell me, what do you pull from that? What do you come from that entire experience? What do you leave with it?
They can do any group that way, not just a Jewish group.
Right.
I myself, I like Jews myself. I've been with them. I know what they are. I'm not anti-Jewish at all, you know.
No.
But the Germans were.
Right.
And, it's just kind of the same difference over there in Iraq now. One faction is after another faction and all. And Iran is the same way, and most of those places over there. I don't believe they like anybody, do you?
What do you leave with the experience? You came to Tennessee. How did the Tennesseans treat you when you came back?
Well, I lived there.
Sure.
But they didn't believe me. They asked me where I'd been. I told them, you just made that up. One woman said, you probably haven't even been overseas.
How'd that feel?
Thank you. That's all I want to tell you, isn't it? Anyway, and another guy, he said practically the same thing. He said, I don't believe any of that stuff. What you said, I just told him I was a prisoner of war, you know that. Didn't believe it. I said, okay, that's about all you're going to hear from me anyway. And then you go out to get a job, you know, next time. That's Oak Ridge, where I'm right close to Oak Ridge. Go to Oak Ridge and had to go over about 3 or 4 times. They were hiring most everybody, you know, then back in 1945. They just made the atomic bomb, you know, dropped it. And Oak Ridge was a big, produced uranium and stuff like that. So they said they were hiring, so I went over there. And they'd say, well, come back in another week or so, you know, so-and-so. After about 3 or 4 weeks, they said, well, we'll put you on down here. And so there was a law back then that if you hired a GI or ex-GI, you had to let him work a year before you could terminate him, unless it was for something, for cause, you know. Well, I worked in about 6 months when they called. I was working on the track where we put liquid nitrogen in it and all this kind of stuff. And they called me and said, come up to personnel. So they said, no, personnel. And I said, well, they want me up here for. Excuse me.
Sure.
So the man said, we want to know if you want to be in the guard force. I said, no, I've had all the guard force I need over in Europe. And he said, well, you refuse to go to the guard force. And I said, I don't refuse. I just said I have a job down as I'm working on now. And he said, oh, you're not either. You're fired. And I said, I'll go talk to your supervisor. And went in. I said, Mr. White, I wish you'd straighten this guy out here. Said, he thinks he's gonna terminate me. There's a law that says you can't terminate anybody unless it's for a just cause. He said, he doesn't know what he's doing. You go back down there and go to work. And so I went back down and went to work. You know. Didn't hear anything for about a year. And then they terminated him. So he's out of here. So I went over to AEC, that's Atomic Energy Commission. And at that time, they were taking all the property, out, and then surplus property and writing it up and all, and you call it a property and supply clerk, and they were hiring them by the dozens. So I went in and talked to the man, and he said he wasn't hiring. I go out and sit in the office, and 3 other guys come in, and they come back out, and I said, what did they tell you in there? Well, he said, we got a job. I said, what would you do? And he said, property and supply clerk. I told him, man, I said, I'll be back tomorrow. And he said, okay. And I went back and he said, I'm not hiring anybody. And the same thing happened, he hired me. I said to him, I said, just what is your problem anyway? Oh, I don't have a problem. It's just because of XGI is what your problem is, isn't it? He said, no, I don't have any problem. He said, what I'm going to do, you had to get a pass to get in there. He said, I'm going to keep you from getting a pass. I said, fine, I'll just go ahead and talk to your supervisor right now. And I'll see who goes where. And it was like, he'd probably thrown me out. I was going to go. And he said, okay, he said, I'll just put you to work then. That's what I'll do. I said, that's what I came over here for, wasn't it? So he put yeah.
So let me ask you something, and then I promise to let you.
Oh, that's okay. I know
If
I'm
you were
boring
speaking, no, you've been wonderful. If you were speaking to older children, young adults.
Like 13, 14 years
Yeah.
old.
Yeah.
I've done that.
What would you tell them?
Told them what I told you.
What would you tell them about your experience if you had to sum it up, rather than the technical aspects of it? What would you tell them about the state of humanity then and when you came home?
The state of humanity is about the same, I think, ever since Adam and Eve. Really. I think it's getting worse because everybody wants to be a terrorist now, it seems like, don't they? And harm someone else. Don't matter who it is, they want to harm someone else. Don't care who it is.
How do you feel about your freedom?
Well, I think it's great.
You feel differently about it than, say, I would, or someone who didn't have it taken away from them for 6 months?
Well, I wouldn't want to volunteer to go back again, but if I was young and I might need to.
How do you deal with the memories?
Well, I deal with them real well. It's everybody else that has a problem. People don't want to hear about it. They say it's all a bunch of lies.
They still say that to you?
Yeah. And I shouldn't say this, but one close member of the family won't even watch that burger.
I'm sorry.
I won't identify.
I was gonna say, who is it?
You have a wonderful, supportive family. It looks so far. I mean, it
Right?
looks wonderful.
Yeah.
That you have here. You've been such a pleasure, Mr. Carden. It's been a wonderful
Well, I'm
experience
sorry
talking
that,
to you.
I wrote down there a few times.
Don't be
First
sorry.
time I've done
So did I. Don't be sorry. You were wonderful. You were really wonderful.